Hello everyone, welcome to this afternoon's learning program session, Teaching the First World War. We know that teachers are really busy this time of year. We're grateful that you could make it and we hope that it's really worth your while today. My name is Sarah, I'm a reference librarian here at the National Library, and today I'll be talking through some of the collections and resources that are available to you regarding the First World War. I'm joined today by my colleague Ben from the education team, who you can see in the other video at the moment. And Ben's going to be talking you through the First World War module of the digital classroom, as well as a few other bits and pieces. We're also joined today by our colleague Judith, and you will see Judith's messages in chat when you need them, and you'll hear her voice later when we're doing some questions and answers. So you might not see her, but she is there being supportive in the background. I'm going to turn my video off now, so you're just going to see me. No, I'm sorry, just going to see the screen. Ben, if you wanted to turn yours off, you can. And what you should see in front of you is the National Library homepage. So this one is just the nla.gov.au website, which I know a fair few of you had a look at. The vast majority of the resources that you'd want to access, to use and repurpose can be found through these three discovery services. One is our catalog, one is Trove, and one is eResources. So those are the three that I'm going to be focusing on today. But before I go with any further of those, there are two quick things I wanted to show you. One is the Get a Library card. We do have a large number of items in our collection which are free for you to repurpose as you want. They're historical, they're digitized, and they have no barrier to them. With that said, we do also have a large number of licensed resources. So these are ones that we pay to access that you'll need to have a library card to get, or your students will. So we'll talk a bit about those as well today, but I wanted to stress that if you don't have a library card yet, you can get one. It is free. Your secondary school students can get one as well, and they can just be posted out to you anywhere in Australia. Now, to get started, we might jump into, first of all, the catalogue. And while the catalogue is the resource that we'd recommend for the physical collections, it's also a wonderful resource for a lot of those digital materials that you'll be wanting as well. So I'm going to start off by using the term that we use in the digital classroom module, which is First World War. And just doing a quick search for that and seeing what we get, which is about 10,000 results. Now, the important thing to know about something with the catalog is that it's not like something like Google or Bing, which tends to be a bit interpretive. It's called fuzzy search. It'll find things that are like what you wanted, or it'll put synonyms in for you. The catalog is completely literal. So if you put in First World War, there might be a whole range of different resources that you're not getting. That, for example, if I put in World War I, just like that, only 434 results, and they're probably completely different. So it's good to know that that those different variations do make a difference. But today, just looking at the First World War, and I'll put that one back in there. Yep. Oops. We have about those 10,000 results, and it's a real mixture. When you're offsite, you can either limit down here and say you just want all online like that, or you can always use that limiter in the beginning here. There is an online option there. And now already we can see that we're getting those types of resources that are useful to you regardless of where you are. You'll see some of the licensed resources in here, and they'll be noticeable because they'll say available online only. And when we click on one of those, you should get a message. Now, because I'm on site, it's telling me you can access this resource because you're inside the building. If you are off-site, it will say you can access this resource if you log in, and it will ask for your library card details. But in this case, because I'm on site, I can just click on that one, and there it is. So here's a book about First World War nursing. Excellent resource, might be good for you, might be good for your students, available as PDF or EPUB, and it's one of many. that you could easily access through the catalogue. And when it says here, subscribed database, that will include all of the data, all of the ebooks as well. Basically, any subscription material that we have in here will be under the subscribed database, whereas any of the material which is historical and has been digitized will be under this NLA digital material heading. So we can click on that one and find that original and historical material. And you can see down here we've got pictures, we've got maps, we've got journals, we've got audio, and down here you can see that the National Library has an oral history collection just on descendants of the First World War soldiers. And I'll quickly show you that one. If you haven't come across the oral history collection before, it's really fantastic. It gives you a flavor of the history that you don't necessarily get from the textbooks. It's a great resource, and a lot of them are available digitized online. You just need to click on the listen option. It'll bring you up to a screen where they ask you to accept the terms and conditions. And today I'm going to try and play a little bit for you.
Come back to Australia then.
I came back in 1917.
So that's quite early, isn't it, really?
I think he took the lock up in 1918.
1918.
Yeah.
So do you think, you said that he received treatment for his wounds. What sort of a wound did he have?
Just above the ankle. The ankle was smashed.
So just with gunshot or something like that?
No, from a whiz bang.
A whiz bang?
Yes, it's a 75 millimetre.
Okay, I hope you were able to hear a bit of that. It's one that's a bit trickier to do over the webinar, but you can see the kind of rich sort of lived experience, the primary resource that you get through some of that oral history material. It's quite fantastic. And one of the other resources I'll just show you there is maps, because surprisingly maps can be quite a useful and compelling resource as well. This one up the top is just a map of the dated events from the war. And you can see when you click on that one, it jumps through to Trove as the delivery service. So sometimes when you're in the catalog, it'll just take you out to where the digital material is housed, in this case Trove, and you can get maps, which will in this instance show you where a lot of the First World War events were. And as with a lot of the material on Trove, this can all be downloaded for you to reuse as you want. So in this case, it can be downloaded as a JPEG. Most of the material in here is kind of a medium resolution. So if you're using it on the screen or if you're printing it out quite small, it's fine for that purpose. Maps are the exception. So something like this map here will be high resolution. You could print it out at size if you wanted to use it in the classroom for some reason. So that's just a useful tip. Now I'm just going to go back here a little bit and jump through to our home page. So we've done a little bit on the catalog, and we've done shown you briefly how to jump out from material to Trove, but sometimes Trove is a really nice starting point, and I know that some of you have seen it before, but I know that a lot of you haven't based on our poll. So Trove does a couple of different things. It's an online service managed by the National Library that's home to a lot of digital content, not just ours, but from thousands of organizations and libraries from around Australia. And it's completely free to use, so anyone could use it, and it's full of some fantastic primary resources. I think that Ben might be going through some of those today as well. So we can do the same thing that we did before. We can just pop in First World War and see what we get. And you can see that it divides things up into the different material types into what we've called zones here. So we can look through and see we've got 91,000 books, 92,000 pictures. Again, up the top, you can limit things to being available online if you want, and that will take it down just a little bit, but it's still tremendous. The Australian content is one that you can use, but it's one of those ones that's based on information that we've been given about the item, so it might not be accurate. So you can use it if you want, but you might be cutting out some actual genuine Australian content when you do it that way. But we just take a quick look down and we can see we've got books that are available, might be from local libraries near you, but original images, not just ours, but everyone else's. Digitized newspapers that we'll talk about a little bit more as well. So those are from 1803 through to 1954, so definitely covering the First World War. Journal articles, so, you know, in terms of trying to find good quality e-resources, this is one place where you could find them. Government gazettes, which are similar to the newspapers, but in the context of the First World War, that would be the place where you would see where awards or medals had been awarded, or various sort of armed forces-based appointments would be in the government gazettes. It's worth noting that there's also a music, sound, and video section. It's not as populated as heavily as others, but it does have some really great content, like some of the Radio National links. So we can see the top result here. Philip Adams obviously did a broadcast about the First World War, and you can link straight through to it. We've talked a little bit about maps, but there's also some original diary, letter, and archive material where it's been digitized. We can find it in here with the online. And I'd also like to just quickly show you that we have lists as well. So if you haven't seen the Trove list feature, if you sign up, and it's free to sign up, but you just need a profile, and then you can start creating your own lists. So I know that a lot of teachers do that to create reading lists or resource lists around specific classes. But it can also be a nice place to look for resources. So if somebody's already done the heavy lifting and has created a list, as this person has, the UQ Digital Curator created a list around the First World War from their repository, that can be something that's really useful that you can take advantage of. So we'll just go back to those ones. That's how you do a little bit of that discovery. Back up to the top. And I'll just very quickly show you how you can pinpoint things a little bit more specifically in newspapers. So if you go to the home page and then click on the digitized newspapers page, you can search just in newspapers if that's what you wanted to do, including advanced searching or browsing by a particular date. So if what we wanted to do was to search, go to 1914, oops, too far, and then narrow down to specifically the 28th of July, which was the launch of the war, we could look at all the newspapers we have with that particular date. But with that said, because of the passage and flow of information around that time, you know, just because war was declared on the 20th of July, certainly didn't appear in newspapers on the 28th of July. Something like this, I'd probably do an advanced search, and I'd put something like war declared. I wouldn't say First World War because it wasn't called that on that particular date. And I'd say from 1914 to 1914, it automatically gives me from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, and click on search. So there we have it now. All of the papers in 1914 and the date that they had it declared. Really interesting that I had one declared the day before. I'm not sure why that one necessarily was, but we can have a look at any one of these and just sort of see what it was the newspapers were saying. So in this case, Austria has declared war upon Japan, and a message from New York states that it has been officially announced in Vienna that the Japanese ambassador, the Austrian capital, has been handed his passports. So that's, we can see this is from the Evening Echo from the 27th of August, 1914. If you wanted to, you can look down the side here and put more limits as well. So you can limit it to the state that you're from if you want it to be regionally significant, or one of your local newspapers if that's what you want. If I was to sort of say I'm interested in South Australia, it will bring up only the South Australian newspapers for you to choose from as well. You can also do things like choose particular word counts. So you might think I'm only interested in larger media articles, not these little short ones like we saw before, or I'm only interested in ones that are illustrated in some way. There weren't many that were illustrated. It wasn't the way that it necessarily worked at that time, but we can have a look at one of those ones. And they've treated this heading as an image, and they've got a large map. So there we go. The Probable Theatre of War. That's pretty fantastic. That's from 1914. And similar to the other images we were looking at around here, these ones can all be downloaded for you to use later. You can download the whole page if you want to as a PDF for you to share or use digitally in any way that you like. So those are those main resources. But there is one more thing that I'd like to show you, which is our research guides. It's one of those opportunities we have to pull together information before for people so they don't have to do the hard work themselves. In this instance, I know that there's one about the First World War down here. So you can see we've got other ones on a wide range of topics that might be of interest to you a number of times, like Federation or the League of Nations. But in this case, I'm going to click on the First World War, and it'll take us to that guide where we have things like tips, subject headings, different keywords that you might want to use to find different types of material. It also has a wide range of different guides for different types of material. Often what you might be interested in is the online resources specifically, and in this case, we've put together lists of authoritative websites that might be useful to you. They've mentioned a couple of e-resources here, but by coincidence, we don't have many on-site e-resources, but these ones just happen to be. So I'd recommend in this instance going to the newspapers and magazines section, because in this one, that's where it'll show you things like the newspapers that were significant in their coverage around the First World War. We've looked at Trove, but if you wanted sort of other perspectives on the war, or even those would have coverage relating to Australia during the wartime, we had the Times Digital Archive, the Irish newspaper, and the Financial Times Historical Archive. All of those are ones that you can access with a National Library card. Papers Past is free and open and unrestricted, much in the same way Trove is, so you don't even need a card to access that one. So yeah, if you're struggling to find e-resources that relate to your topic, research guides can really help. This is the one for the First World War, and these are the e-resources that probably you'd have the most use for. And they also recommend a number of different magazines as well as the newspapers. So that is just my very quick overview of some of the ways and places that you can find resources relating to the First World War. At this point, I'd love to hand over to Judith to find out if there have been any questions.
Hi, Sarah. Yes, we've had a couple of questions. The main one that I'd like to cover is actually from a lady called Macules, who was asking about the articles on Trove being peer-reviewed.
Okay, we've just got a little bit of an echo happening here, so we just might get Judith to work up on that one there. Sorry about that, everyone. Thank you for your patience. So the question was, I think, whether articles on Trove are peer-reviewed. And so if you're talking about the ones that appear in the journal section, and I'll go back to that one quickly so we can all take a look at it. I'll just say First World War, and we want online content, and we'll go to the journal articles. And the answer is it's really variable because it draws in from a wide range of different sources. So in this section here, you will get some things that appear in databases that are a little more than industry magazines, or they might be just newspaper articles themselves that don't appear in Trove, that appear from other sources. So you'd have to check on a case-by-case basis. If it's taking you out to a journal database, the journal database will be able to tell you specifically whether it's peer-reviewed. Certainly if you went to one of the library's e-resources like EBSCO, which I can show you at the end if people are interested, it's really clear whether or not something has been peer-reviewed. But the answer is that it's a mixture. Some of it will be original primary source material, some of it will be peer-reviewed material, and some of it won't. You can tell a little bit more about the material type down the side here about you know, whether or not it's a conference paper or a book chapter or a report of some kind. but you can't tell just from looking at the surface whether it's been peer reviewed in Trove. We don't have the data to do that, unfortunately. Hope that answers that question. Were there other questions?
There was. We were wondering if a teacher wanted to use Trove resources or items from our collection in their classroom, do they need to worry about copyright?
It depends entirely on the material. If you're clicking through the material that's licensed, then there will be some considerations around how that can be used. Certainly if it's our digitized and open material that we're allowing you to download, then that's entirely permissible. Certainly things like pictures before 1954 are already out of copyright. And you can, if you ever want to check with us, particularly relating to our own collection material, you can always check with us about how things can be used. But there are certainly, and you probably know this as teachers better than me, there are specific provisions to support educational use in the classroom. So even if some material is in copyright, there are opportunities to use it.
We have one last, hopefully quite simple question. Does anyone need a card with the National Library to access Trove?
No. Trove does not need a National Library card. It's completely open. You can have an entire classroom of students log in and try to find newspaper articles relating to a specific wartime event if you wanted to do that. It's completely unrestricted. The only thing that you need to have a membership for, and even that doesn't require a card, it only requires you to sign up and create a username and password, is if you want to do some things that are unique and want and to save to your profile. So if you want to create lists that you're saving, or if you want to add any kind of social tags or comments or things like that, you need a profile for that. You don't need a National Library card though. Okay. So that's me and my section, and I'm really happy to hand over to Ben now.
And can everyone hear me okay, first of all? Just making sure my sound's coming through. Sarah's showed us a range of really high value resources that the library provides. But my section, what I really wanted to do, was build on that by introducing a resource that we've developed specifically for education use, which is our digital classroom, and introduce that and the module on it that is for teaching the First World War. So I'm just going to share my screen with you. Set that up and just talk a little bit about what is the digital classroom first up. And so, because of the sheer breadth of the National Library's collection, it can support a really wide range of curriculum areas and multiple kind of content areas for teachers and students. And the idea is that the digital classroom brings together our collection in ways that we hope are meaningful for educators, for teachers, so that you can explore those themes and that content and bring that collection into your classrooms. It has material for all year levels from year 3 up to senior secondary, and completely free to use. So the resources are designed for you to use either directly or indirectly. So you could use them for your own background research or with your classes. And they're not linear lesson plans. The idea is that we know we're not experts in your classrooms. We don't know your students. You know your students. You know their learning journeys and what they've learned already and what they're going to learn. So we don't want to be prescriptive in that sense. What we want to do is give you tools that you can remix, you can repurpose, you can take little pieces of to fit into your students' learning styles, but also your teaching methods. And so we want it to be a really adaptable resource. And so let's, I guess, jump in and have a bit of a look. I'm going to jump over to the live site now. And first of all, I'll just show you from the National Library's homepage. I'm hoping everybody can see that, how to find the digital classroom. We'll put the link up a little bit later on. But the things that Sarah showed you were all under this tab, Getting Started here. but under using the library is where you need to go to find digital classroom. So using the library, down under learning, you click on digital classroom, it'll take you through to the home page. So this is the front interface of the digital classroom. It's a landing page that kind of gives you a little bit of a teaser of maybe what you might find on the site, introduces it. There's an introductory video, which I won't play because it's just me talking and I'm talking to you live now anyway. But it also shows that there is content on there for all year levels, as I said, from year 3 up to senior years. You can navigate it using the bar over the side here, or filter them by year level using these panels here. I'll just show you a couple of, because I noticed we have some primary teachers here as well. I'll just show you a couple of the primary learning level resources before we jump in and look at the one that we've identified for the First World War. So just year 3, picking one at kind of random. This one's for year 3 history, and it looks at all the themes of year 3 history, things about memory and community and diversity, symbolism, Australian symbols, things like that. So we got to do some really great stuff with this one. We hold the first published copy of Blinky Bill. And so it looks at Australian symbols in that way. So just, as I said, I don't want to go into too much detail here, but I just wanted to kind of show that there are resources for a range of year levels, but also quite a large range of subjects to the traditional things you'd expect from the National Library of History and English, but we have stuff for science and geography, and there's more coming, branching out into those broader areas of the curriculum that I'll talk about a little bit later. So let's jump into the Year 9 section. Here's some good examples actually. There's our first ever personal development, health and physical education PE resource, which looks at sport, but sport and its effect on culture. So these are the 3 resources that we have for Year 9. Celestial Empire, that looks at early modern China, the sport one that I've just mentioned, and the big one in the Year 9 history curriculum, which is the First World War. So the approach that we've taken with this module is to use the library's collection to look at the war, but to try and put it into context, both in the progression of the war, but also Australia's place in a global war. And the way we've decided to do that is using news maps that are published in newspapers. And we saw a really great example of that from Sarah a little bit earlier. So the other thing we really try to do a lot with the digital classroom is repurpose and reuse existing library content. So things that have been developed by the library for other purposes maybe. So things like our events program, the exhibitions that we host here at the library, as well as our publishing arm as well. And that's the approach that we've used here today. So there's this fantastic publication, Where Are Our Boys? How News Maps Won the Great War, which was published by, or was written by our map curator, Dr. Martin Woods. And that's it there. We've kind of used some of the content from that as a framework to hang the resource off and use that to kind of weave together different parts of the war and teaching the war. Another one of the great videos of great elements of the digital classroom is its use of video. So obviously we've used video throughout it, and obviously you can use it or not use it, but the videos that we've created for the site are specifically designed for education use. So they're short and they're relevant to the curriculum. So I'll show you some really good examples of those, but most digital classroom modules have a really excellent audio-visual component, which is not just material straight out of the collection, but things that we've created for it as well. So if you can see again on the bar on the side here, there's navigational tools and also these tiles here. The first one I just wanted to run you through is curriculum links. So we want to make the curriculum links really explicit, really obvious for each module on the digital classroom, because we know that as teachers, you want to make sure that the content that you're using is relevant and that you're not kind of wasting time teaching things that are only kind of tangentially related to the curriculum. So we want to make it really clear which bits of and which content, specific content descriptions that this resource supports. And we do that by setting them out, but also linking directly through to the Australian Curriculum website, and so you can see exactly where it fits in, and the kind of rationale that we've used to create the resource. So that's pretty straightforward, but I guess the other element of this is that it's not just the content side of the curriculum that we're looking at here. We're also looking at the skills side. So, and particularly, as we've seen, identify and locate relevant sources using ICT and other methods. So setting your students research tasks using something like Trove to find newspaper articles is just an amazing elaboration of that particular area of the curriculum. So we'll talk a bit more about that as we go on. But the next thing probably that flows on to look at is the introductory activities. So most of the resources that we develop for Digital Classroom have these introductory activities, and they're kind of a bit content independent. They don't really dig into the curriculum content in a huge way, because we want them to sort of allow you to discuss broad concepts that will be kind of covered in a unit of work on the First World War, and start to tune students into those themes and things like that. And so they can be things like, really broad background questions, key terminology, things, words and phrases that you'll need to know. As you go through, there are these background information tabs that drop down more detailed information that, as teachers, that might be a useful thing to read, but you might not want it on the screen if you were to use this on a smartboard with a group, so you can read that and then you can hide it away again. And then from there, you can dig into visual content from the library's collection. So a good example is the Anzac book. And so you can blow that up again. Obviously that works really nicely on a smartboard, but it's an item that the library is digitized. So we link through to the digitized version, as you saw with Sarah. Drops you straight into the Trove browser, and from there you can actually interrogate that source. And for books, for digitized books, this book is digitized in its entirety, 216 pages. The book viewer is just really rich. You can flick through pages and you can see, this is a real object, which I think is quite a powerful and valuable thing. You can see, things like library stamps and that kind of stuff. So there's certain elements where having the real thing is more important, but I think, sometimes when you get a digital object that you can zoom right in on and you can interrogate in that way, that can be really powerful as well. So I'll just jump back to the resource again and just continue through. The other thing that we've done, that we do for quite a few of our modules, is a timeline of events. And this one, particularly with the way that the war is structured, you can kind of set it up that way. And it's with the anniversary of Armistice coming up, getting access to some of these newspaper articles that we've already identified for you is a great way to start to look at those themes. And again, you can link straight through to those articles and go from there. As I mentioned, we are trying to make as much use as we can of existing library products. And so this is a modular resource. It's not finished. We'll continue to add material as it becomes available. A really good example of this is we had, as part of our events program, we had a really great panel discussion by members of the Great War Study Group that meet here at the library. And there's some kind of really big names of First World War scholarship, people like Peter Stanley and Joan Beaumont, Michael McKernan and others. And we were able to record that as a podcast, which is on the library's podcast feed, and that's great. But the thing we can do with Digital Classroom is then put a bit of curriculum framework around it and some activities and that kind of thing, and have that as another resource that you can use in the classroom. And as Sarah mentioned with oral history sound recordings, that can be a really powerful way, or a really kind of nice point of difference as far as the media that you use. So not always being the written mode. listening to audio, watching video can break things up as well. So so that's another element. And along those lines, and further along those lines, is something that we've been doing a lot more of as well, which is commissioning video content with historians as well. So we have these people associated with the library for various reasons. You know, they might be publishing books for a publishing arm or participating in events and things like that. So while they're here, we can grab them for an interview. And so this one's a good example, and I'll play a little bit of this one. This is Dr. Jennifer Wellington talking, who's an expert on commemoration and the kind of social elements of war, talking about remembrance and commemoration and the way Australians remember the First World War. Really interesting stuff, and a big part of the curriculum as well. They're all embedded in the website, ready to go. So I'll just play a little section of this one and to give you an idea of what they look like.
We're at this endpoint of a series of centenaries of Australian involvement in the Great War. James Brown, writing in 2014, I think estimated that the Australian government is spending about 200% of what Britain is spending on centenary commemorations, which is quite remarkable given the much smaller population. There's a sense in Australia, at least among some people in charge of giving out government grants and such, that this is very important and it should be remembered.
I'll just leave that one there. Just they are just we won't go through the whole thing, but they are again quite snappy. Only a couple of minutes. A good discussion point that you can put up on the smartboard and then have a talk about with the class. And another kind of similar one is from another military historian, this time Dr. Aaron Pegram, who is talking about the Australian contribution to the war in its broader context, where the Australians were and that kind of thing, talking about the Western Front and Gallipoli and comparing them and that kind of thing too. But he also has a really great video where he talks about a really well-known National Library collection item, which is Keith Murdoch's Gallipoli letter. So I'll just play the short introduction to this one as well so that you can see it.
Keith Murdoch is a very prominent figure in terms of Australia's First World War story. He is a journalist who, at the outbreak of the First World War, almost becomes the Australian official war correspondent. Murdoch is from a very well-to-do Melbourne affluent family. And so much so that he's good friends with the Australian Prime Minister, Andrew Fisher. In learning that he didn't become the Australian war correspondent, Keith Murdoch then asked Fisher, do I do the right thing and enlist in the Australian Imperial Force? And Fisher tells him not to, because there are other factors at play, and then Murdoch can also play his part in the war.
I'll let this one run just a little bit longer because it has images from the document.
By September 1915, there had been a significant mail delay regarding the Australian troops fighting on Gallipoli. It took anywhere up to 6 weeks to receive a letter from home, more so for packages. Murdoch is sent to Egypt to report on this mail delay and hopefully try and rectify the situation. But that's his cover story. The Australian Prime Minister had not been getting a full briefing on what Australian forces have been primarily involved in on Gallipoli. As members of the British forces, we were primarily under British command. And so all news that's actually making its way to Australia is heavily censored and it's been going through several filters before getting a very sort of rosy and a very half-truth kind of accounting of what's happening on Gallipoli.
I'll just stop it there. So that's one of the great things we can do with these videos is bring in library collection material to highlight the points that these historians are making. And a good example I should have shown you while I was back in the conscription theme in the module was the other thing that we'll do that again follows on from what Sarah was talking about is we'll create trove lists a lot of the time to bring together. The digital classroom shows off National Library collection material, but Trove, one of the great things about it is that it doesn't just have our stuff in it. So we can use Trove lists and link through to them to kind of say, all right, here's a great 26 item list a mixture of primary and secondary source material that relates to conscription. So you can go further. You can go further than you might just with the resource as it stands. And that's the thing, I guess, that we have in mind with the digital classroom, is that we know that teachers are time poor. You're pressed for time with a lot of the kind of requirements as far as reporting and admin and that kind of thing. So having things that you can just pick up and use is what we're really trying to do. Services and resources like Trove and even the library's collection as a whole are amazing. But whether you have the time to find stuff in the collection at all, for a start, but then also once you do find it, you've got to actually build the learning content, the educational framework around that. If you've got time for that, that's fantastic. But if not, we want to have these tools that will allow you to use our collection, bring it into the classroom without you having to do it yourself. That said, we want to think of a resource like the digital classroom as a gateway to those broader library services. So getting into Trove and the library's collection is great, but it's kind of that next step. So wanting you to be able to set research tasks for students and things like that, and feel comfortable to do that, but have everything you need to just pick up and use, because also we know that you're not necessarily just teaching one subject as well, but have these things that are ready to go, I guess. And so to give you an idea of what's next, the other thing that we really want to do with Digital Classroom is keep it growing. We know that new content is what keeps people coming back. And as I said, with the First World War resource, we don't think of it as finished. And there's a lot of the modules on the Digital Classroom that we don't think of as finished, because we're always going to be adding new material. We're talking about those things constantly. But also, we're adding new material as things happen. So a good example is our newest resource on the Digital Classroom. Only went up in the last few weeks. That's around our current exhibition, Cook in the Pacific, which is for senior secondary. It's our first senior secondary resource, and it looks at the Endeavour voyages and that kind of those voyages of the Enlightenment, both from the science and strategy point of view, but also the Indigenous responses to those voyages as well. And a similar thing. So we've kind of done some things with this resource that are similar to the First World War one, in that we're working with leading historians and commissioning content, getting them to write essays for students to respond to. And so that's the kind of stuff that we're looking at doing for secondary students. But there's also new modules coming for primary students around children's literature, visual arts as well, that look at the National Library's pictures collection, and that kind of give different perspectives on the way that the collection might be used in classrooms in lots of different ways. So I think I might kind of leave it there. I think we've got a few minutes for questions. I'll just pop a slide up before I do, that is our contact details, the link to the Digital Classroom as well. And that way you can send us, if you've got any questions that end up being outside the this webinar, you can send us an email directly. If you think of something later, it's got the link directly through to the Digital Classroom there as well. And I might kind of leave it there and open it up to see if we got any questions since the last time.
And I've just joined back as well, so if there's anything that I can answer, I'm happy to. Judith, do we have any questions?
We did. Christopher was wondering if you can access Australian War Memorial digitised material on Trove. And I
Ah,
know Ben mentioned that it's possibly in some of the developments with the lists, not just going to be about National Library collections.
I'm just going to quickly stop Ben's screen sharing, but I'll come back to it.
Yeah, I feel like you might be able to do a better job of answering this one. But that's right, that we, you know, the digital classroom is really there to highlight the National Library's collection, but something like Trove, if collections are put together in the right way, they get sucked into Trove and then delivered through a search in Trove, which is the Australian War Memorials collection in some way. Is that right, Sarah?
Well, if it's in the War Memorials collection that's online is in Trove and discoverable through Trove. One way of getting to it is just sort of serendipitously. So if you're searching for something around the First World War and there's a highly relevant resource from the War Memorial, you will find it in your search results. But hopefully, if I go to people and organizations, you should see that one of the places you can go is here under people and organizations, and you should get not just biographies about those institutions, but a full list of all the resources they have as well. So this is resources about the War Memorial, and this is resources by the War Memorial that you can click straight through to. So this is an online one that we'll do there. So we'll view the online one. Whoa. Yeah. So it's a few clicks. Oh, that was a broken one. Oh, it's because it's Flash, and I think this computer hasn't been upgraded in a while. But yeah, so basically you can go, anything that is in the War Memorial is in Trove. If you're specifically looking for resources from the War Memorial, you might want to go to the War Memorial website. But I can also quickly show you as well, and I'm not logged in. I'll have to log in quickly. When you have a profile all of your own, oops, wasn't expecting to log in for this session today, but you can go to your profile and you can limit your search to particular institutions. It says libraries, but it's not just libraries that are in there. So you could say that you just want to search for, oh, I just typed in Australian first once. Should come up. Yeah, so the Australian War Memorial, and if you added that to and deleted out everything else, you would only be searching for that one. You can see an example here. The last time I was searching for something, I was looking for something located in Adelaide, so I limited my search to libraries that were located in Adelaide. So that's another way of discovering things from particular institutions. So I hope that's useful.
It is, thank you. We do have a couple questions about digital classrooms though.
This is up to you, Ben.
Excellent.
So the first one was, when you're talking about new modules being added, will the old ones be taken down at the same time? No,
definitely not. They're there forever. So it'll grow and become a really large resource, but we don't remove things. No, we might add to them, we might update them and change them as new material becomes available or that kind of thing. But we're not taking anything down. No.
That sounds amazing. And one last little question about digital classrooms. If a teacher did want to show some of the videos, for example, that you had on there, would they need to let us know in advance, or is that okay?
No, absolutely not. No, they're all completely free to use. And that's, we touched on this in the first Q&A, is that as far as educational use provisions in the Copyright Act, they're quite broad. And so we want to make it very clear that everything on the digital classroom is completely, we've checked all the clearances, all completely available to reuse. But also most of the things that you'll find in the broader collection and in Trove, because you're using it in an educational capacity, and as long as you're not publishing it for profit, most of the time it's completely fine to use. But you certainly don't have to ask us to play those videos. We'd love you to. Yeah.
And I think one's just popped up in chat for you, Ben. It says, any plan to offer a similar set about World War II for level 10s, especially about the home front?
Yeah, we're always open to new suggestions, and there's a few kind of things that we need to take into account. We need to have the curriculum, we need to have the collection materials to support that. So we'd love to have suggestions, and we'll go away and look and see what is in the library's collection that can that can support a resource. But yeah, we know that the First World War is big in Year 9, Second World War is big in Year 10. So that's something that's on the radar, definitely. But we need to look and see what our angle is and what the best kind of significant National Library collection material might be to build a resource or base a resource on, I guess you'd say.
I can see there's just one more question in chat. It's asking what resources we have or digital classroom resources we have around women in the First World War. And I can do a quick search to have a look, but how about we start with digital classroom? Yeah,
so there's nothing kind of that relates specifically to individual women or that kind of thing in the resource as far as I know, because it takes that kind of broader top level approach. But as I said, it's not finished. So again, if we find an amazing kind of item in the collection, or if you have something that that we hold that's it could be a diary or something like that, that's something that we can definitely look at adding in a similar way to the conscription module or that kind of, or the conscription theme to that module. So yeah, as I say, nothing directly at this stage, but could happen, yeah. And I guess if you're happy to do a search, Sarah.
Yeah, well, I'll do one just quickly in Trove here. So Women in First World War, and we can have a look at what's available online. And we can see that we've got lots of images, and you can see there's some of the crewel work or embroidery that happened. We could see there's some digitized newspaper articles in there about it, and some journal articles as well. But I'd also like to take this opportunity, because we had a question about peer-reviewed articles, is to show you something specifically from beginning to end in e-resources. So for example, if you wanted to go to our e-resources, once you have a library card, you can use any of them. I'm going to go to EBSCO at the moment because it's a good multidisciplinary one. It'll suit most secondary school contexts. You can choose any one that you want and search across them, but Academic Search Complete is a good one. I'm just going to click that through. If you had a National Library card, you'd have to log in. I'm on site, so I don't have to do that. I'm just going to quickly open up my database search so that I'm covering all the different databases at once. And we'll type in Women First World War and see what we get. And as I was saying before, this is where you can do things like limit to peer-reviewed articles, if that's what you want to do. And you could also limit it to full text articles if you wanted to. And you have a whole range of different things here. So women as casualties. Oh, this is famous. I think we might have come across this. There were the fundraising signature quilt movement, which was a big thing in the First World War. So there's an article about one of those. And I think if you just sort of delved into it, that's kind of where you'd find different resources. And if you're looking for peer-reviewed resources, e-resources is a really easy way of doing that. It's not one of Trove's strengths, going for those peer-reviewed articles, but more the primary source material is what you'll find a lot of there, digitized and available. So I hope that answers that question. I might just quickly check to see if there are any more. So it says, thanks for the response about World War II. It's easy to find resources about combat aspects, but I project that home front aspects are an area that would be more fun and engaging. Okay. Yeah, I think
thanks for that. Yeah, that's really great feedback, and that's something we'll keep in mind when we do look at a Second World War resource, because we don't want to be duplicating things that you can find easily, or that other resources do better. So that's really useful.
Okay, so I think that's all the questions we have today. I'd like to thank Judith and Ben today for the help, and thank you for everyone for persevering with us today as we had a couple of small hiccups. We will stick around for another couple of minutes if people wanted to ask us questions through chat or through anything else. We're happy to do that. Thank you again. I hope that you enjoyed the session, and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.